You don't belong in first class. The words cut through the air, spoken by a flight attendant named Nicole, cold as a command. No greeting, no glance at the ticket. She reached out and tore the boarding pass in half like it was just some junk mail. In her steel-cold eyes was undisguised contempt, aimed at the man wearing a simple black t-shirt and jeans, a look that didn't fit her idea of who should be here. But what Nicole didn't know was that in just 30 minutes, that same man would fire her in front of all the passengers and crew, with dozens of phone cameras capturing every moment. This man wasn't just some stranger. He was Marcus Carter, a billionaire, CEO, and a 25% shareholder in the very airline she was working for. A crash of prejudice about to go down in aviation history as a lesson learned. Drop a comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to catch more inspiring stories like this. Marcus Carter stepped onto the plane with such calm and quiet confidence that no one in first class even noticed. No one knew who the man in the plain black t-shirt, faded jeans, and simple sneakers was. Even fewer knew that he had deliberately dressed that way. No Rolex, no bodyguards, no sign that he was behind nearly a quarter of Horizon Airlines' ownership, the airline he was quietly investigating. He quietly walked down the row, his eyes quickly scanning every flight attendant, every glance, every small detail most people would overlook. Everything was going according to plan. Marcus wasn't here for a vacation. He came to confirm what countless internal reports and social media posts had been saying for months, that the people in Horizon uniforms were quietly sorting passengers based on looks, clothing, and vibe, a polite way to say discrimination. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew it was happening, and today, Marcus wanted to see it with his own eyes. His seat was 2A, a first-class seat, booked under his real name. No special favors or connections. Everything was legitimate. By the book, no room for excuses. But when he reached the seat, someone else was sitting there, not by accident. A well-dressed, middle-aged white couple, holding glasses of champagne, sitting comfortably as if it had always been their spot. Nicole, the lead flight attendant, stopped him before he could say a word. "You're in the wrong cabin," she said, without even looking at his ticket. Her voice was cold, without even a hint of basic verification. Marcus calmly showed his boarding pass. Nicole glanced at it and frowned. "This seat's been changed. Please move to economy class," she quickly said, like she was used to pushing people like him away. Another flight attendant, Brian, younger and with an arrogant air, stepped forward, smirking. "Are you sure you're on the right flight? You look more like an economy passenger." That wasn't a question. It was their way of cloaking contempt in professional language. Marcus didn't react. He quietly held out both his ticket and ID, a brand new, clear Illinois ID, impossible to fake. Nicole just glanced at it and gave a thin smile. "This looks fake. We've seen this trick before. There was a similar incident in Dallas," she said, already signaling for security. Marcus still said nothing. No arguments, no raised voice, no reaction, but his eyes, cold as ice and deep as the ocean, stared straight at Nicole. Every move she made, every sarcastic word from Brian, was recorded by him not to fight back with words, but to use at the right moment, because he didn't need to shout to be heard. He just needed to tap his phone once, make a call to Rachel, his closest executive assistant, and soon the entire Horizon leadership would know what was going on. But Nicole didn't stop there. She turned toward the economy cabin. "If you don't leave, we'll have to ask you to get off the plane," she warned. Her expression was no longer just confusion, it was a threat. The first-class passengers were starting to take notice. Some lifted their heads from their drinks. Phones, or luxury magazines. Something was beginning to unfold right before their eyes, and no one yet knew that the man about to be kicked off the plane was their boss. A few rows behind, 22-year-old flight attendant trainee Mia Lang was watching it all. It was her first day working solo, assigned to first class to learn the ropes. But what she was seeing wasn't in the training manual. She glanced at the electronic ticket scanner. Marcus's ticket had scanned green valid. She hesitated for a moment, then quietly pulled out her phone, started recording, and slipped it into her jacket pocket. Marcus stood there, motionless, just as powerful as anyone else, but choosing to let them push the situation further. Every insulting action, every discriminatory word, every denial of clear evidence, they all count as proof. And in just a few minutes, you won't need to introduce yourself, because the truth will reveal itself. Flight 227 from Chicago to Los Angeles hadn't closed boarding yet, but the atmosphere inside the first-class cabin was thick with tense discomfort. Marcus stood in the aisle, his ticket scanned and valid, ID still in hand, his gaze steady, his demeanor calm. But that silence was what made those in the wrong feel even more uneasy. Nicole crossed her arms and raised an eyebrow slightly. "How long are you planning to stand there?" she asked, her tone annoyed as if disturbed. Brian leaned against the cabin wall, holding a tablet, chuckling softly. "He probably thinks he's some big shot," he said quietly, loud enough for nearby people to hear. Marcus didn't reply. He gently tucked his documents back into his jacket pocket, then slowly placed his small suitcase into the overhead bin above seat 2A, his seat. That move made Nicole immediately take a step back. "You're deliberately ignoring the crew's instructions," she said louder, as if wanting others to hear. The atmosphere around them turned uneasy. Some passengers exchanged glances. Others looked down to avoid getting involved, but their eyes were drawn to the center of the incident. At that moment, footsteps echoed from the back of the cabin. Linda Walsh, the airport security officer, stepped forward. She was tall, with a serious gaze, her right hand always near the radio clipped to her belt. "What's going on here?" she asked quickly. Nicole immediately stepped forward, pointing at Marcus. "This passenger is occupying someone else's seat. He refuses to leave, even though he's been told the ticket is no longer valid." Linda nodded and looked over at Marcus. "Sir, I'm giving you a chance to cooperate. Either you leave the seat and go back to economy class, or we'll have to escort you off the plane." Marcus looked her straight in the eye. "I showed my ticket. I scanned a valid code. This seat is mine, booked under my real name, and it has never been changed." Linda stayed calm, but clearly felt caught between both sides. "I don't have access to the booking system," she said. "I'm just following the chief flight attendant's instructions." Marcus nodded lightly. "Then I won't move until someone with real authority speaks up." While the standoff continued, Mia Lang, the young intern, sat in the service cabin's side row, looking at the ticket scanner. Green. She had seen it light up when Marcus boarded. She couldn't forget it. After a moment's hesitation, she stepped closer. "Sorry, but this passenger's ticket appears to be valid." The scan was successful. Nicole spun around sharply. "Mia, get back to your seat. Don't get involved if you don't understand." Mia stepped back and lowered her head. But before retreating, she quietly started recording for the second time. In row 4, two middle-aged white passengers, Emma Larson and Michael Grant, had witnessed everything from the start. Emma slowly took out her phone and opened the video app. "I can't let this go on," she whispered. Michael nodded. "She just tore his ticket right in front of us," he said. "This is going to blow up." Less than 10 seconds later, Nicole stepped forward, snatched the ticket from Marcus roughly, and tore it in half right in front of the whole cabin. A clear ripping sound echoed like a slap in the air. Either you get off, or you'll be escorted out. The choice is yours. Marcus blinked once, then spoke slowly. I think you just made a big mistake. He pulled another card from his jacket pocket, a thick black business card embossed with his full name, Marcus Carter. Nicole laughed loudly. Now there's a fake card too. You guys are really creative. She turned to Linda. Please have him escorted off. But Marcus didn't move. He pulled out his phone and tapped a saved number. Rachel, record what's happening. Alert the management. We have a situation that needs handling. On the other end, Rachel Harris, the executive assistant, didn't ask any questions. Understood. Sending the notification now. The wealthy couple Richard and Laura Bennett, who were sitting in seat 2A Marcus had reserved, remained silent. They sipped champagne, avoiding Marcus's gaze like he was invisible. Emma shook her head and hit the upload button with the hashtag #HorizonShock. Within seconds, the video began to spread, and just like that, Flight 227 was no longer just any ordinary flight. It became a live crime scene being broadcast to the whole world. While the first-class cabin fell into awkward silence, dozens of phone cameras started turning their attention. Passengers quietly opened their cameras, pointing them at the escalating confrontation between a calm black man and the increasingly out-of-control flight crew. But the most noticeable wasn't the rich passengers or the bystanders. It was the young woman standing behind the service counter, Mia Lang. The only intern on the flight, on her first solo assignment, and so far, the only person still believing in right and wrong instead of status and rank. Mia was curled up on a small seat in the galley area, eyes fixed on Nicole's iPad controller. She clearly saw Nicole open the passenger list. Scroll to row 2A. Then, delete the name Marcus Carter with just one tap. Whispering in horror, she said, "She just deleted his name." Brian, standing near Nicole, smirked and said, "Problem solved. No name, no rights." Mia gripped her phone tightly. This time, she didn't turn on the recorder through her earbuds. She opened the voice recording app directly, hit start, then tucked the phone inside her blazer pocket. Brian's laughter, Nicole's sarcastic tone, every word like, "Not in those jeans, honey," echoed clearly through the microphone. In row 4, Emma and Michael were still filming, still updating. "This is discrimination," Emma whispered in the video, her voice trembling. "He hasn't raised his voice at all. They're trying to kick him out because of how he looks." Michael nodded. "I'm filming from another angle. They're getting exposed." In the middle of the cabin, Marcus sat motionless, head slightly bowed but eyes sharp and cold. He didn't need to say a word. Every move the crew made was telling its own story, and they had no idea that all the passengers and the whole internet were watching as witnesses. Nicole clenched her teeth, looked back at Marcus, then turned to Linda. "This passenger is not complying with instructions. It's time to ask him to leave the plane." Linda stepped forward, her tone firmer. "Sir, this is your final warning. If you don't leave your seat, I will have to take enforcement action." Marcus raised his head and looked her straight in the eye. "You're putting yourself in a situation you can't back out of. I suggest you wait another 5 minutes." Linda frowned. Why, Marcus said quietly but clearly, "Because in 5 minutes, you'll get a call from the person who pays your salary." His words weren't loud or threatening, but carried a heavy weight. Mia heard it. Linda heard it too. A few nearby passengers heard it as well, and everyone felt one thing: this man was no stranger. Meanwhile, Mia headed back to the galley. She stood silently, listening as Nicole and Brian kept mocking, "That guy probably printed a fake ticket at home. I bet his black card's a fake." Then Nicole said bluntly, "Carter, erase him from first class. That guy doesn't belong there. Mia's hands trembled. Clear him from the seat. That guy doesn't belong in first class. Mia's hands trembled, but this time, she wasn't just recording. She hit the save button and named the file Evidence, Marcus Carter, Cabin 2A. Outside, the atmosphere began to stir. A teenager in row 6 whispered to his mother, "Mom, he didn't do anything wrong." The mother nodded, pulled out her phone, and started filming. Nicole returned to her seat, annoyed, but before she could give the next order, Marcus gently took the phone and called again. "Rachel, send the entire recording from Mia to James, Sarah, and David. Tell them it's time." On the other end, Rachel's voice was calm. "Sent." "The board is reading it now. Expect feedback in a few minutes." Marcus nodded quietly. At the same time, Emma and Michael posted the clips on social media. The hashtag #HorizonShock started to spread. In less than 10 minutes, Emma's video had thousands of views. Michael posted footage from a different angle. Viewers began commenting hard-hitting racism. Hate how they looked down on him just because of his clothes. Someone needs to be held accountable. The cabin was no longer a quiet seat for the wealthy elite. It had turned into a stage for a full exposure, and at the center of that stage, Mia Lang, the young, unknown woman, quietly held the evidence that could change the entire situation. No one asked her to do it, no one expected it, but she chose to stand on the right side. And in just a moment, her voice could be the piece that made the whole system unable to hide anymore. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin of Flight 227 gradually shifted. When Emma posted the first video with the caption, "A black man had his ticket ripped up right in front of me for no reason. This is America." In 2025, the shares and comments skyrocketed. Immediately, Michael's phone kept buzzing non-stop. He played his video. He showed his ID. Plane ticket. Still rejected because he doesn't look like the first-class type. "I'm filming because it's the right thing to do." Within 5 minutes, at least 3 other passengers in the cabin also turned on their cameras. An elderly woman wearing glasses in seat 1C whispered to her neighbor, "See that? He didn't say a harsh word." But they still treated him like a fraud. Her companion nodded. "I saw his ticket scanned green. So why do they keep saying it's wrong?" A wave of eyes turned toward the flight crew, no longer curious, but full of doubt. From a personal clash, the situation had turned into a moral test for the entire cabin. At the back, Linda Walsh, the security officer, began to waver. She had worked at this airport for over 8 years, handled fights, arguments, even thefts, but never had she seen so many passengers stand up for one person like this. And never had a person's silenced voice been so naturally confirmed by those around her as it was now. Nicole still didn't back down. She stepped up to where Marcus was sitting, raising her voice. "I'll say it one last time. If you don't leave, we will use force." Marcus didn't respond, just lifted his head, his gaze calm as if waiting for things to reach their necessary limit. At that moment, Emma stood up. "I see his ticket scanned as valid. He has a right to be here." Her voice was clear and firm. Nicole turned and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and let the crew handle this. I'll sit down when he's treated fairly," Emma replied firmly. Michael also stood up. "I'll confirm that too. He's not causing trouble, not disturbing anyone. You tore up his ticket right in front of me. And I have the video." He raised his phone, the screen clearly showing Nicole tearing Marcus's ticket in half. The whole cabin began to stir. A passenger in row 3 exclaimed, "Why would they do that? If this is how the airline treats customers, I need to reconsider flying with Horizon." A woman in a gray suit sitting by the aisle nodded. We can't just ignore this. Each whispered comment spread like sparks in a dry forest. In the back, Mia Lang still clutched her phone tightly. She knew the moment had come. As Nicole and Brian approached again, she stepped forward. "Sorry, but I need to speak." Her voice trembled but was clear enough. "I saw the blue scan code. The ticket was valid, and I recorded the conversation in the galley." Nicole froze. Brian turned around, stammering. "What did you say? I heard you two talking badly about this passenger. Saying he doesn't deserve to be in first class, that his black card is fake." "I've recorded it all." Mia didn't look at anyone else, just at Marcus. The whole cabin fell completely silent. Nicole opened her mouth to argue, but didn't get the chance. A fifth-row passenger stood up. "If this girl dares to speak up, I believe her," another added. "We've been hearing them from the start. They're disrespecting this passenger just because of how he looks." A Latin man in seat 2C emphasized, "I've been through that. Never any proof. But this time, we have it." The pressure was no longer on Marcus. It weighed heavily on Nicole, Brian, and Captain Daniel, who had been silently observing with cold eyes. Calculating the risks, he stepped forward, spoke into the mic. "All passengers, please remain seated. We will handle a passenger who is not following instructions." But this time, no one sat down. Emma said loudly, "I'm not sitting while he's being treated like that." Michael raised his phone. "I'm live streaming." "You're facing hundreds of thousands of viewers right now," a teenager shouted from the back row. "We stand up for him." One by one, people began to stand. A sea of people in first class stood shoulder to shoulder, phones in hand. No harsh words, but everyone carried the determination to defend the truth. Nicole looked around, panic starting to show in her eyes. Brian stepped back, gasping. Daniel gripped the mic tighter. Linda grabbed the radio but didn't press the button. Mia lifted her head, for the first time during the flight, feeling she wasn't alone. Captain Daniel Pierce stepped fully out of the cockpit, his tense face hidden behind his pilot sunglasses. He had no other choice. What should have been a minor internal issue had now turned into a public relations crisis, spreading all over social media. Daniel knew that if he didn't regain control of the cabin immediately, the entire flight and his career could be ruined. He moved close to seat 2A, where Marcus still sat upright, unmoving, calm as if the whole world around him was just a play he was watching. Daniel spoke loudly through the cabin mic. "Passenger Marcus Carter is not following crew instructions. According to FAA regulations, if you do not leave your seat immediately, we will have to take security measures." His voice tried to sound authoritative, but his eyes showed a flicker of doubt. Marcus didn't react. He just looked Daniel straight in the eye and said in a calm, clear voice, "You're choosing to protect those who did wrong instead of a passenger with a valid ticket." Daniel growled. "I'm following protocol." Marcus tilted his head. "And does your protocol include tearing up a valid ticket and deleting a passenger from the system?" That question hit like a direct blow. Daniel said nothing. Nicole interrupted sharply, her voice high-pitched. "This passenger is using a fake ticket and fake ID. There's no name on the seat log." Mia stepped forward, her voice low but firm. "You're the one who deleted that name from the system." "I saw it with my own eyes." Nicole spun around angrily. "You're slandering a colleague." Mia remained unshaken. "I recorded it. And, if necessary, I'll send it straight to the board of directors." That statement made the atmosphere tense. Brian's face went stone cold. Daniel adjusted his glasses, his eyes quickly scanning the passengers lined up. Phones raised. Emma spoke loudly. "Stop twisting the truth." He showed his ID, scanned his ticket. "You're the ones refusing to face the facts," Michael added. And now you're about to kick a CEO off the plane just because he's not wearing a suit. Nicole tried to turn things around, addressing the passengers. Please take your seats, or the flight won't take off. But no one moved. A wave of determined silence spread throughout the cabin. The passengers stood tall, shoulder to shoulder, like a human shield blocking any unfair interference. Linda looked at Daniel, her eyes full of doubt. Are you sure you're doing the right thing? Daniel whispered. Just follow the orders. But even he was starting to feel the cracks forming in his power. This scene, a black man being kicked out of the seat he bought, witnessed by dozens of people and thousands of online viewers, could no longer be controlled by commands. Marcus hadn't revealed his identity yet. But every word, every action, and even his silence was a silent declaration, I know who I am. The problem is, you don't. He pulled out his phone and whispered, Rachel, it's time. Rachel's quick reply came, sent the full recording to James, Sarah, and David. The executives have received it. Marcus didn't smile or nod. He simply said, they'll need to hear one more part. This part has to be heard loud and clear in the cabin. Just then, Mia came out for the third time, holding her phone with the recording app already running. Sorry, everyone, but I have to do this. She raised her phone and played the recording, Remove Carter's name from the list. That name doesn't belong in first class. Nicole's voice came through clearly. Then Brian's mocking laugh sounded. Bet he bought his ticket with a coupon or borrowed someone's jeans. That voice rang through the cabin like thunder. A woman in row 3 put her hand over her mouth. An Asian man nodded repeatedly. They really said that. Nicole stepped back, her face pale. Brian tried to cut in. She edited it. That's fake. But no one was listening. No one believed it. And most importantly, no one was sitting still anymore. Linda slowly let go of the radio. She looked at Daniel. This isn't right. Daniel tried to hold on to authority. An order is an order. But for the first time, his voice wasn't firm. Emma turned to Marcus. They don't trust each other anymore. You're about to win. Marcus quietly stared straight ahead. He didn't need to win. He just needed the truth to come out, and the right people to be held accountable, and the right people to step up and change the system from within. While the cabin still buzzed with the echoes of Mia's recording, Marcus Carter quietly lowered his phone. No flashy gestures, no threats, but in his eyes, there was no longer patience. It was the look of someone who knew the play was deep enough and it was time to close the curtain. He didn't need to shout, because the power wasn't in the volume. It was in real authority, and he held it. Marcus tapped his phone screen and opened a special app connected internally to Horizon Airlines' operating system. A screen popped up with the status Internal Access, executive level. He didn't need to type a password. The phone recognized his fingerprint under the seats. A passenger happened to glance at the Horizon Executive Admin icon on the screen and frowned slightly. Rachel, Marcus said through his AirPods. Send the entire original ticket booking system file for seat 2A to James, including the log deletion history, Rachel replied immediately. Sent. James confirms he's reviewing it. Sarah is cross-checking with the backup server. He continued, tell David to start checking all edit logs from this month, especially at the Chicago branch. Rachel answered firmly, emergency audit scheduled. The legal team has already been called in. Marcus nodded slightly. In the shadows of what seemed like a small dispute, a system investigation was quietly underway, ordered by him personally, up front in the cabin. Nicole began to sense something was off. Her eyes glanced at Marcus, paused on the phone he'd just used, then shifted to the faces of passengers watching closely. No more hesitation. No more doubt. Now, They saw Marcus not as a passenger who'd been wronged, but as someone about to turn the whole game upside down. Brian moved closer to Nicole and whispered, "He looks kind of familiar." "I feel like I've seen him in the papers." Nicole frowned. "Carter, wait, no way." Her eyes showed a flicker of fear. "If that's really Marcus Carter, we're doomed." At the same time, inside the cabin, the passengers still stood firm. A quiet but powerful wave spread from Marcus's calmness. Mia stood behind him, gripping her phone tightly, as if it were the only shield she had against injustice. Linda, the security officer who used to be tough and determined, was now clearly hesitant. Her hand hovered near the radio, but her finger no longer pressed any buttons. Marcus turned his head, speaking quietly but firmly. "You don't need to act, Linda. Unless you want to be named in tomorrow's board report." Linda didn't reply, but her eyes shifted to a different attitude, no longer defiant, but cautious. Daniel, the captain, couldn't stand the long silence any longer. He stepped forward, his voice growing louder. "I'm the highest authority on this plane. I demand all passengers sit down and stop filming. This situation is being blown out of proportion." But as soon as he finished, Emma raised her phone higher. "We're not exaggerating. We're recording the truth, and if you try to stop us, you'll be next to be exposed," Michael added. "We've seen enough. And now we want answers." Marcus looked at Daniel, smiled gently for the first time, then said, "You're confident in your role. But maybe you forgot that I'm also one of the people who sign off on the annual captain evaluations." Those words made Daniel pause. "You? Who are you?" he stammered. Marcus didn't answer. He just checked his watch. "Rachel," he said into the earpiece, "switch cabin surveillance to live mode. Grant access rights to James." Rachel replied, "Done?" "James is watching from the internal system." Marcus exhaled gently. "Good. 3 minutes left. If they keep trying to force this, we'll proceed with handling the entire crew." In the back row, a young passenger whispered to their companion, "I think he's the airline's operator." The other frowned. "No way," but then nodded. "Wait. Carter. Is that Marcus Carter?" That question was like a spark falling into a gas tank. Whispers passed from row to row. The airline CEO, the founder of Horizon. "He's here." Nicole heard the whispers, and her expression instantly changed. She stepped back, eyes fixed on Marcus as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Brian was no longer arrogant either. He muttered, "Did we just slap our own boss in the face?" No one answered. Meanwhile, Marcus sat upright, unmoving, as if this whole flight was a test he had scripted from the start. But the truth was, he didn't need a script. He just let the truth speak for itself. Nicole Harris staggered backward toward the galley, where the light from the control panel clearly reflected off her pale face. She knew she had gone too far, but worse than tearing up the ticket or ordering the passenger off the plane was what she and Brian had just blurted out, and what Mia had recorded, not hinted at, but said in clear, blunt, and undeniable words. Mia didn't play any more of the recording. She just stared straight at Nicole, her gaze fearless. "I clearly heard you say, 'That guy doesn't belong in first class.'" Mia's voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to make nearby passengers turn around. Brian tried to interrupt. "She's editing the tape. She's tampering with the audio." But before he could finish, a passenger in the third row stood up, holding up his phone. "I'm recording too, and I heard it exactly the same way. Stop trying to cover it up." In the middle of the cabin, Marcus was still seated. But his face was no longer calm. It carried a strange calmness, as if everything he had predicted from the start had just unfolded exactly as he expected. He looked at Nicole, without blaming her, just said briefly, "You wrote your own indictment." At that moment, Emma's phone kept ringing non-stop. She glanced at it, her eyes widening. My video just hit over 100,000 views. It's trending now. Michael smiled bitterly. Mine got shared by 3 journalists. They're asking for details. Daniel, the captain, looked like he'd been shocked. He stepped back, looking around the cabin now filled with light from phone screens and silent anger. He realized no statement could save this crew from crashing now. He suddenly turned to Nicole and said in a strangely low voice, "Why did you delete that passenger's name from the system?" Nicole didn't answer. Brian stammered, "We thought it was a fake ticket." Because of how he was dressed, the words slipped out, uncontrolled. But for Marcus, that was all he needed to hear. He stood up. For the first time since the flight began, he stood in the middle of the cabin, needing no introduction, no confirmation. He looked directly at Daniel. "You don't need a fake ticket to exclude me. You just see a black man in jeans, and you decide I don't belong here." Linda, who had once reached for the radio, now let go completely. She stepped back, accepting the truth unfolding before her. Mia stepped forward, standing beside Marcus. She spoke loudly. "I recorded everything. No edits, no cuts." They clearly said he didn't deserve a first-class seat just because of his clothes and appearance. Her voice trembled but was steady like a bell ringing in the night sky. A passenger in row 6, a silent Asian man, now stepped closer. "I was once denied business class because I didn't look professional." I said nothing. But today, I'm not staying silent. An older woman in the front row turned around. "My child went through this. No one believed him. But this time, everyone will see." The simmering anger in many passengers now seemed ignited. No one shouted, but every look, every whispered word, every nod all pointed to one undeniable truth: this was no longer a mistake or technical error. This was discrimination, and this time, it had been exposed. Nicole sat down into the jump seat near the emergency exit, hands trembling, eyes no longer looking straight at anyone. Brian stood frozen, leaning against the wall. Daniel lost control, turning to Rachel over the cabin system. "Requesting all passengers to sit down. We will deal with passengers who do not comply." But Emma immediately stood up. "No one sits down while the truth is being twisted," Michael added. "We won't stay silent." "We're speaking up for the truth," someone from the back row shouted. "We're here, and we're not closing our eyes anymore." Marcus said nothing more. He looked at Linda. "If you're going to do something, do it now. Because if you mess with me, you won't just lose your job." Linda froze, her hand trembling slightly, but she stayed calm. "I'm not messing with you. I need to think," Marcus replied sharply. "You have 5 seconds." Just then, Rachel spoke into the earpiece. "The entire board is online. Sarah has confirmed the system logs were tampered with. James has authorized you full control." Marcus closed his eyes for a second, then whispered, "It's time." The atmosphere in first class completely shifted. Those who had been silent to avoid trouble now stood up, phones in hand, their eyes no longer avoiding but fixed on the flight crew. A middle-aged man in a brown suit from row 5 stepped into the aisle and said loudly, "We are customers, but also witnesses. And today, we won't let anyone be kicked off this flight just because they didn't dress the way you want." A young woman stood up from the 3rd row, raising her phone. "My name is Carla. I'm a civil rights lawyer. This video is being recorded, and I will represent Mr. Carter if he needs." Marcus nodded slightly, saying nothing, but his eyes suddenly seemed to send an invisible message. "Thank you for breaking the silence." Daniel, the captain, turned toward Nicole and Brian, his voice lowering. "Things are getting out of control." Nicole lowered her head. Brian was breathing heavily. no longer looking arrogant like before. They both knew what they called order was being replaced by a new kind of order, the order of truth. Mia was still standing there, close beside Marcus, her hand gripping her phone tightly like a symbol of power. At that moment, a voice rang out from the back of the cabin. "I'm not a celebrity, nor a CEO, but I was once kicked out of business class just for wearing a hoodie." A young black man slowly stepped forward. "And I wish someone had stood up for me that day, like we're standing up today." Those words sparked a fire in every passenger's heart. An elderly woman in a purple sweater placed her hand on her heart, whispering, "It's the first time I've seen people not turn their backs." A schoolboy looked at his mother, then turned on his phone camera himself. "I'll record everything." "Mom." Marcus looked around the cabin, where every gaze now shone with united light. He turned to Daniel, speaking loud enough, "See, they don't need me to be a CEO. They just need me to be a person." Daniel clenched his fist. "What do you want?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He just looked at Linda. Still undecided, Linda glanced around. The passengers were no longer just passengers. They were witnesses, a community, a wave that if she resisted, she would be swept away herself. I can't carry out this order." She took the radio off her shoulder and gently placed it on the tray near the cabin door. "I refuse to take part in the coercion." Applause rang out, at first scattered, then growing louder. One by one in the cabin began to applaud, not like clapping for a performance, but clapping for a change that could not be undone. The unity spread like underground water bursting forth after being held back for so long. Emma stepped forward. "Speaking clearly, as passengers on this flight, we oppose all acts of discrimination and demand that this crew be investigated," Michael continued, "and we won't allow anyone to be removed from here without a clear explanation from management." Another voice shouted. Agreed. Daniel tried to hold on to whatever authority he had left. "I'm the captain. I have the right to decide flight security." But Marcus calmly interrupted, "And I'm one of 3 people authorized to suspend the entire Horizon flight if passenger safety is threatened. And the threat now is not me, but the way the crew is abusing their power." Rachel spoke again through the earpiece. "The board has finished their meeting. James said, if the crew doesn't leave the cabin immediately, the airline will face a federal investigation. Sarah requests a crew replacement within 10 minutes. David has confirmed Marcus Carter as a valid passenger. Deleted logs have been restored." Marcus replied briefly, "Good." He turned back to the passengers and said for the first time to the whole cabin, "Thank you all." Marcus stood up. Facing the new staff group, he spoke quietly, just loud enough for everyone to hear, "I don't want any of you to bow your heads. I want you to hold your heads high and never let what just happened happen again." They nodded, one by one, with determined eyes. In the third row, a middle-aged white man stood up. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I'm a small shareholder of Horizon. I apologize that we didn't act sooner." Marcus turned toward him, his eyes lighting up. "No one can turn back time. But we can control what happens next." The cabin speaker came on again, but this time it was the new captain, a calm-voiced Asian man. "Hello, passengers. I'm Captain Reyes. The new crew has taken over the cabin. Flight 227 will depart in just a few minutes. On behalf of management, I apologize for what you witnessed and thank you for staying calm. Mr. Marcus Carter's presence on this flight today isn't just a coincidence. It's a turning point we'll remember forever." The passengers began clapping again. But this time, it was for something better, for transformation and for action. At the back of the cabin, Linda stood quietly. She wasn't fired, but she wasn't innocent either. She hesitated, almost placing her hand on Marcus's shoulder under someone else's orders. Marcus stepped closer. "You still have a chance," he said. "Not because you're innocent, but because you knew when to stop." Linda choked up. "I won't let this become a quiet stain. I will make it right." Marcus nodded. "You'll be transferred to another base, and I'll have Mia oversee your retraining." Linda blinked Mia. Marcus smiled. Who's more fitting to lead a new chapter than the one who kept her conscience clear in the toughest moments? Mia blushed. Surprised, but didn't refuse. "I'll do my best." Marcus nodded. "We don't need more people. We need the right people." In row 4, an older woman sitting next to her husband spoke up. "We've seen it all. And I believe from today, Horizon will change," Marcus replied softly. "Horizon isn't those who were fired today. Horizon is those who stay behind to do what's right." The cabin door closed, signaling the plane was about to take off. All passengers settled in, but this time, no one felt like they were being judged. They were part of something bigger than themselves, a moment when justice didn't come from a courtroom, but from courage and collective action. And the man who had his ticket torn up, who was once kicked out of his seat, was now sitting right there, as if he'd never been doubted, like he had always belonged there from the start. Horizon Flight 227 left the taxiway at 8:07 p.m., almost 2 hours behind schedule. But nobody in the cabin complained. No grumbling, no sighs. Everyone on board understood clearly they had just been through a journey where time wasn't measured by clocks, but by values. And what was fixed today would lay the foundation for deep change tomorrow. Marcus sat back in seat 2A. No one doubted him anymore. No one judged him by his jeans or simple t-shirt. Next to him, a middle-aged passenger turned and quietly said, "Thank you. Not just for standing up for yourself, but for making it possible so others don't have to bow their heads anymore." Marcus nodded softly, eyes toward the front cabin, where Mia Lang stood with the new crew. After the plane stabilized at cruising altitude, Captain Reyes spoke over the intercom. "We're pleased to announce the new crew has officially taken over. The lead flight attendant for today's flight, with approval from the Board of Directors and Management, is Ms. Mia Lang." A pause. Then applause broke out. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Just hands one by one clapping firmly and meaningfully. Mia hesitated as she stepped to the front of the cabin, clearly still getting used to being the center of attention. But as her eyes swept over each person, each one who had stood up for her, and she for them, she regained her confidence. Marcus stood up and walked over to her side. "You don't need to say a word," he whispered. "They've seen enough." But Mia still held the mic, her voice trembling slightly but full of emotion. "I'm just an intern. I don't have wings yet. I never thought I'd have to make such an important decision. But today, I learned that the truth doesn't require a degree. It just needs courage." The whole cabin fell silent, then broke into applause. This time, it lasted longer. In row 5, a young passenger raised his phone to capture the moment. "This girl just gave me faith in aviation again," he wrote on the posted video. Marcus turned to Rachel through the earpiece. "Make the announcement." Rachel understood immediately. Internal memo sent. Mia Lang is officially appointed as a flight attendant starting today. She will receive additional training and be assigned as the representative in the Internal Bias Prevention Training Program. It wasn't just Mia who was honored. Linda, who once hesitated but ultimately made the right choice, also got a second chance. Marcus approached her once the cabin had settled. "You might think you weren't brave enough. But sometimes, courage means knowing when to stop." Linda choked up. "I'll prove it. I want to be retrained. And this time, I won't stay silent." Marcus nodded. "You'll be training alongside Mia." And I want both of you to become the new generation's guiding team. Across the cabin, Emma and Michael also received their well-deserved recognition. Marcus instructed Rachel file the records for these two passengers. Give them lifetime membership, and if they agree, invite them to join the airline's passenger committee, Rachel replied. Updated. They just received an email inviting them to be special passenger representatives for Horizon. Emma turned to Marcus. Clearly moved. I only did what everyone should have done. Marcus smiled. That's exactly why I need you. Optimism began to spread through the cabin. A Latin passenger stepped toward Mia. My daughter dreams of becoming a flight attendant. Today, I have something to tell her. Thank you. Mia bowed her head. And tell your daughter this, we don't just serve passengers, we protect values. A soft announcement came over the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, you will receive a personal apology letter and a refund for this flight within 24 hours. All passengers on today's flight will be upgraded to permanent priority membership, and all recent events will be made fully transparent. No one needed to say more, because what had happened spoke for itself. A cabin that once witnessed injustice now stands as a place of acknowledgement and change. Those who were once looked down upon are now recognized. Those who were once silent are now speaking out. And the one who had their ticket torn is now seated in the highest place, not for power, but for character. The cabin lights dimmed gradually, leaving only soft glows along the aisle and ceiling. Outside the window, the sky deepened into a dark purple. Stars slowly appeared, silent witnesses in the night sky. The Horizon 227 flight had been airborne nearly 2 hours after a delayed takeoff, but for all aboard, time passed like a page in a book they didn't want to close. Marcus sat quietly in seat 2A, his seat. No one challenged him, no one doubted, no one denied. But to him, none of that mattered as much as the fact that those around him had seen the truth and chose to stand on the right side. He looked toward Mia, the young woman still moving gently between the rows, helping each person with a dedication he had never seen before. Pinned on her chest was a new, shiny badge. Real wings, not just a trial item from her internship. At the back of the cabin, Linda stood near the restroom door, her eyes watching the passengers she once overlooked. She no longer wore her old uniform, but held a temporary training ID badge in her hand. A passenger nodded at her as they passed by, and she smiled back. For the first time in years, she no longer felt like just a rule enforcer. She was starting over with eyes wide open and ears ready to listen. Marcus turned his head toward the window. Below, the city sparkled like glowing networks stretching out. He remembered the first time he flew at age 15, sitting in the last row, next to the bathroom. With a discounted ticket his mom had saved 2 weeks of meals to buy. Back then, no one cared who he was. They just saw a black kid in an old shirt and unlabeled shoes. And even then, he knew to survive in this world, he had to claim a seat no one could refuse. Today, he wasn't just reclaiming that seat for himself. He was claiming it for everyone who had ever been overlooked just because they didn't look like they belonged. Rachel spoke gently in his earpiece. Marcus, #HorizonShock just passed 5 million views. The board has decided to release the full details of the incident. The press release is being sent out, Marcus replied softly. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't call this a rare accident. Call it what it really is. Say this time, we aren't covering it up, Rachel responded firmly. I'll rewrite it. Short and honest, Marcus nodded quietly. Captain Reyes announced over the speaker, we're flying at 36,000 feet, about an hour from our destination. Thank you all for your patience, calmness, and for coming together to make a flight that will probably be remembered for years to come. A soft round of applause broke out. Then someone else joined in. And gradually, the entire cabin applauded together, but this time not for any one person, but for the group, for doing what's right, and for a new generation of aviation where people aren't judged by their watch or suit, but by their character. Emma turned to Marcus. "I still can't believe I'm witnessing this," Michael added. "I think every airline should use this clip for internal training." Marcus just smiled. "I didn't come here to make noise. I came to make a change." As the plane began descending, a child ran up from the back row, tugging his mother's sleeve. "Mom, is that guy really a superhero?" The mother bent down, speaking softly but loud enough for nearby seats to hear. "He's not a superhero. He's a good man. And good men don't need capes." Mia looked back at Marcus, her eyes sparkling. "Thank you for not walking away," Marcus replied, "because I was once the one who was ignored. And I can't let anyone else go through that if I can stop it." The cabin door opened at 9:56 p.m. Passengers disembarked in an orderly fashion. But they left different from how they boarded. They stepped off with deeper eyes, wider hearts, and memories that won't fade easily. Nicole, Daniel, and Brian were now just names in the investigation report. But Mia, Linda, Emma, Michael, and everyone who dared to stand up were proof that a system can change, as long as enough people refuse to stay silent. Marcus stopped at the plane's exit door, looking up at the small sign with the Horizon Airlines logo. He touched it, then turned away without saying a word. He didn't need to, because true legacy isn't about what people shout about, it's in how they treat each other when no one's watching.